Although I'm gonna be honest, this still sort of feels like Michael Scott has been kidnapped and is being held captive in some guy's basement. So The Patient is one of the newest Hulu originals, and it is absolutely terrifying. I started watching this show mostly because I'm a really big fan of Steve Carell, and I absolutely loved his run as Michael Scott on The Office. And one of the things that's kind of followed him throughout his career is that after playing Michael Scott on The Office, it's really hard for me to see him as any other character aside from a different universe version of Michael Scott. That aside, Steve Carell is one of the greatest actors in the world, and The Patient is one of the more interesting TV shows that I've seen in a while. Now, I say that because it's sort of a psychological thriller drama. Usually with a lot of those types of shows, they tend to clock in around 45 to 60 minutes, and for whatever reason, other than this being just an interesting creative choice, The Patient is 20-minute episodes. And I'm gonna be honest, I think it actually helps the show a lot. Now, I don't know if I'm dating myself too much here, but one of the things this show reminds me of a lot is the book and movie by Stephen King called Misery. Basically, in this show, a therapist is kidnapped by one of his patients who turns out to be a serial killer. Now, there's only a few episodes of the show up on Hulu right now, but over the initial few episodes that I've seen, this is basically the serial killer attempting to work through his issues with his therapist while also having his therapist chained to a bed in the guy's basement. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about the show is that it's a really small cast, and it honestly almost feels like a play. The only people involved in this show so far are Domhnall Gleeson and Michael Scott. Like I said, it's really hard to not see Michael Scott in every single character Steve Carell plays. But it's an interesting decision by the show because the entire series so far is only taking place in the basement of the house of this serial killer. Steve Carell is chained to a bed, and every episode so far is them attempting to work through the serial killer's issues while Steve Carell attempts to escape this guy's basement, hoping that he does not become one of his victims. And I think that's why the shorter runtime of a show like this works really well. They're able to focus in on a lot of these really dramatic and dark scenes and can sort of just let them play out for 5, 10, 15 minutes and leave the episode as it is right there. It helps you get really immersed in a show like this when you know that there's a good chance the scene that the show is starting on is going to be the only scene throughout the entire episode. And because a show like this is so narrow in its scope, it helps to just see the interaction between these two very different characters. The atmosphere in a show like this is really well done because it takes place in such a small space, and because a vast majority of these episodes are literally Domhnall Gleeson and Steve Carell sitting across from each other at a small table in the guy's basement, just talking, makes it feel very uncomfortable. The sort of thing where during a lot of these scenes, and they even show this in the episodes, you're kind of waiting to see if Steve Carell can figure out a way to just get out of this situation in general. Is this going to end with him actually killing Domhnall Gleeson's character? Is this going to end up with Domhnall Gleeson's character just deciding to kill him, that this is not worth working through these issues that he desperately still wants to work through? And I think that sort of storytelling has me really invested to see where a show like this is headed, because right now it's in an incredibly unpredictable state, and I love that. Now, while I'm not the biggest fan of these new sort of weekly release TV shows on streaming services, I will say that this show so far has me intrigued enough where I really want to see where this is headed. And at the same time, it's actually really cool to see Hulu taking more chances with shows like this, because they did this with The Dropout a few months ago, and I thought that show was fantastic. I thought it was really well done, and they are absolutely nailing their casting decisions in these types of shows. I think if you're somebody that's really into these like documentary style murder mystery thriller semi-horror, you could sort of say, this is going to be a show that you're going to want to check out, because I have no idea where it's headed, but I am so intrigued to see how this all ends up playing out in the end. It honestly feels like this is another one of those sleeper hit Hulu shows, a lot like The Dropout, and it's really exciting to see a streaming service like Hulu getting more and more invested in original TV shows like this. And it's also pretty cool to see Steve Carell playing other characters that aren't Michael Scott. Although I'm gonna be honest, this still sort of feels like Michael Scott has been kidnapped and is being held captive in some guy's basement.